I never thought a single dinner could destroy me, but that night my own mother invited 33 relatives into our home, and somehow made me feel like I did not exist. I stood in a room full of family, yet no one saved me a seat, no one spoke my name, no one noticed my silence while laughter filled the air. I watched my mother smile for everyone except me, and in that moment something inside me broke forever. This is not just a story about a dinner, this is the story of an American girl who realized she was invisible in her own family, and how that pain forced her to choose herself before she disappeared completely. That evening began with hope, which makes the pain hurt even more. I remember standing in front of my mirror, smoothing my dress, telling myself that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe my mom would look at me the way she used to when I was little. Maybe she would smile and say, "I am glad you are here, Emily." Maybe I would feel like I belonged in my own family again. I had spent most of my life chasing moments like that, moments where I felt chosen, not tolerated, moments where I felt loved, not useful. But I did not know yet that this night would show me a truth I had been avoiding for years. Downstairs the house was alive with noise, cabinets slamming, footsteps rushing, voices calling out lists and plans. The smell of food filled every corner of the air, roasted chicken, baked bread, sweet desserts. Everything looked warm and perfect, like something from a magazine. My mom was moving fast, her hair done, her makeup perfect, her energy sharp and focused. She looked like a woman. She did not look like a mother thinking about her daughter. "Emily," she said without turning around, "make sure the big table is set properly. We cannot look unprepared in front of everyone." Everyone. That word always meant them, never me. I nodded quietly and started setting the table. We had rented extra chairs and preparing for something important. The dining room looked stretched and unfamiliar, like it had been redesigned for strangers. I placed plates, glasses, napkins. My hands moved automatically. While my thoughts wandered, I kept wondering where my place would be, where I would sit, who would sit next to me, if anyone would even notice. As the doorbell began ringing, relatives arrived one after another. Laughter filled the house, hugs, kisses, loud greetings, stories from years ago. I stood near the wall, smiling politely, watching my mom glow in the attention. She hugged everyone tightly, complimented outfits, laughed loudly. She remembered birthdays, achievements, promotions, marriages, everything about them. No one asked me anything. Not how I was, not what I was doing with my life, not even a simple hello beyond a quick nod. I felt like background noise, like something that existed only to fill space. My mom kept giving me small tasks. "Emily, bring more drinks. Emily, refill the chips. Emily, clean that corner." She spoke to me like staff, never like family. Every time I tried to stand near her, she moved away, drawn to another conversation, another laugh, another moment that did not include me. Dinner time arrived and everyone gathered around the long table, chairs scraping, voices overlapping, excitement rising. My mom directed seating with confidence, placing people carefully, laughing, joking, making sure everyone was comfortable. I stood there waiting, holding a serving bowl, my heart beating faster with each passing second. Finally I asked softly, "Mom, where should I sit?" She looked surprised, like she had forgotten I existed, then waved her hand toward the far end. "You can sit there if there is room." "If there is room." I walked slowly to the end of the table and found a small chair barely fitting between people who barely knew my name. I sat down and stared at my plate, feeling my face burn with embarrassment. No one spoke to me, no one noticed I was there. Food was passed, conversations exploded, jokes, memories, stories, everyone laughed together. While I chewed silently, the food tasted like nothing. My chest felt heavy. I tried once to speak when they talked about an old family vacation. I shared a small memory, but my voice disappeared into the noise like it never happened. No one responded. I wanted to disappear. I watched my mom serve the best portions to others, smiling proudly, touching arms, leaning close. She did not look at me once, not even by accident. Then she stood up and raised her glass. She talked about family unity, love, togetherness, how important it was to be surrounded by people who matter. Everyone cheered, glasses lifted, voices agreed. And I sat frozen, holding my glass, unsure if I deserved to lift it. I felt something crack inside my chest. After dinner, people moved around, desserts were served, photos were taken. My mom gathered everyone for a big picture, telling people where to stand, adjusting positions, calling names. She looked happy, fulfilled, proud. "Emily, take the picture," she said, handing me her phone. In that moment I understood everything. I stepped back, raised the phone and framed the shot. 33 relatives smiling together, my mom glowing at the center. I pressed the button and captured a perfect image. A perfect image without me. I walked into the kitchen quietly, my hands shaking, tears falling silently. Memories flooded my mind, moments from my childhood, birthdays where my needs came last, achievements that went unnoticed, feelings dismissed as overreacting. I realized this dinner was not an accident, it was a pattern. I had never been invisible by mistake. I had been invisible by choice. Upstairs later, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly, the house quiet again. My phone buzzed, family photos already shared, laughter, comments, hearts. And there it was, the big picture, everyone smiling together. And me nowhere. That was the night I learned loneliness is not about being alone, it is about being surrounded by people who choose not to see you, and in my own home with my own mother, I had never felt more alone in my life. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a heavy chest, the kind that makes it hard to breathe deeply. For a few seconds I lay still, listening to the house. The silence felt different now, colder, like the walls themselves knew what had happened the night before. Downstairs I could hear my mom moving around again, cleaning dishes, putting away leftovers, already shifting back into her normal routine, as if nothing important had happened, as if no lines had been crossed. I stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from the dinner. Over and over my mind kept returning to that photograph, the perfect smiling family, and the empty space where I should have been. It hurt more than words because it confirmed something I had feared for years but never fully admitted. I did not belong in my own family. When I finally went downstairs, my mom barely looked up. She was sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone, smiling at something on the screen, probably comments on the photos, people praising her hosting, telling her how wonderful the night was. "Morning, Emily," she said casually. "Make sure you clean the dining room today, it looks like a mess." That was it. No thank you, no apology, no "Are you okay?" I nodded quietly and began clearing plates, folding chairs, wiping tables. Every movement felt slow, like my body was heavier than before. As I worked, memories from my childhood crept in, moments I had buried deep, times when I waited by the window for her to come home from work, and she arrived exhausted, irritated, uninterested, times when I brought home school awards and she placed them on the counter without comment, times when I cried and she told me to toughen up. I had always told myself she loved me in her own way. But that morning I started to question if love should feel like this. As I cleaned, I overheard her talking on the phone, laughing, telling someone how successful the dinner was, how everyone had such a great time, how proud she was to bring the family together. Her voice was warm, kind, full of affection, a version of her I rarely received. Something inside me hardened. Later that day I left the house and drove aimlessly through familiar streets, past my old school, the park where I used to sit alone after classes, the coffee shop where I studied in silence, surrounded by strangers who somehow felt less distant than my own relatives. I parked near the beach and sat in my car, watching waves crash against the shore. The ocean looked endless, and for the first time in my life I wondered what it would feel like to disappear into a life where no one expected anything from me. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives. "Thank you for the great dinner. Your mom is amazing. Tell her we loved it." Not a single message asked how I was or even mentioned my name. I stared at the screen and laughed softly, a hollow sound that surprised even me. That night I tried something new. I sat across from my mom at the kitchen table and forced myself to speak. "Mom, can we talk about last night?" She sighed, immediately annoyed, like I had interrupted something important. "Emily, I am tired. What is it?" I took a breath. I felt small again, but I pushed forward. "I felt really invisible last night. I felt like I did not matter." She frowned, shaking her head. "You are too sensitive. Everything is not about you. I was hosting 33 people. Do you know how stressful that is?" I felt my chest tighten. "I know it was stressful, but I was your daughter. I did not even have a seat until I asked. You did not include me in the photo." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh my God, Emily, you always do this. You make drama out of nothing. You should be grateful I even let you stay during the dinner." "Let me stay." Those words echoed in my mind like a slap. I realized then that this conversation would never go the way I hoped. She did not see my pain. She did not want to. I stood up quietly and went to my room, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, but this time the tears did not come. Something else replaced them, determination mixed with sadness, mixed with clarity. That night I made a decision. I would stop begging for a place where I was not wanted. Over the next few weeks I changed small things. At first I stayed out longer, took extra shifts at work, spent more time alone. I stopped trying to impress her, stopped sharing my plans, stopped hoping she would suddenly change. She noticed, of course, but not in the way I expected. "You are never home anymore," she complained one evening. "Are you trying to avoid me?" I looked at her calmly. "For the first time in my life, I am just living my life." She stared at me, confused, like she did not recognize this version of me. And maybe she did not, because this was the first time I was choosing myself. At work I found comfort in simple routines, the steady rhythm of tasks, the polite kindness of coworkers who did not know my past but treated me with more respect than my own family ever had. One coworker, Sarah, became someone I trusted. She listened without judgment when I finally shared parts of my story. "That is not normal, Emily," she said gently. "You deserve better." Those words stayed with me. I began saving money, quietly planning something I had never dared to consider before moving out. The idea scared me and excited me at the same time. The thought of having my own space, my own rules, my own peace felt unreal but necessary. One evening my mom announced another family gathering next month, a smaller one, she said casually, like it was nothing. I felt my stomach drop, but then something surprising happened. I felt calm. "I will not be here that weekend," I said. She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I already have plans." She scoffed. "Family should come first, Emily." I met her eyes steadily. For the first time I understood what she meant by family, and for the first time I chose myself. That night, as I packed a small bag preparing to stay with Sarah for the weekend, I looked around my room: posters, memories, childhood items, and realized how much of my life I had spent trying to earn love that was never freely given. The dinner with 33 relatives was not the beginning of my pain, but it was the moment I finally saw it clearly, and once you see something clearly you cannot unsee it. As I closed my bag and turned off the light, I felt fear, sadness, and something else: hope, because for the first time I knew my story was not ending here, it was just beginning. The weekend at Sarah's apartment felt like stepping into a different world, one where silence was peaceful instead of heavy, and where no one looked at me like I was in the way. Her place was small, cluttered, warm, the kind of space that felt lived in and loved, and that alone made my chest ache in a strange way. She did not ask me to explain everything. She simply handed me a blanket and said, "You are safe here," and something inside me loosened for the first time in years. That night we sat on the floor eating takeout, watching old movies and laughing softly, and I realized how rare it was for me to laugh without fear, without waiting for someone to shut me down or tell me to be quiet. It scared me how quickly I relaxed, how naturally I fit into a place that was not mine. And it made me question why my own home never felt that way. On Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through the window and I woke up without dread, without that familiar knot in my stomach. I checked my phone and saw missed calls from my mom, messages asking where I was, when I would be back, none asking if I was okay, none apologizing for anything. I turned the phone face down and made coffee with Sarah, talking about small things, plans, dreams, random thoughts, and for the first time I spoke about my future without shrinking my words. When I returned home that evening, the house felt colder than before. My mom was in the living room watching television. She glanced at me briefly. "Where were you?" she asked. "I stayed with a friend." She frowned. "You should have told me." I met her gaze. "I did tell you I would not be here." She said nothing after that, and the silence between us felt sharp but different. I was no longer afraid of it. Over the next months I focused on my plan. I worked longer hours, saved every extra dollar, and kept my head down. My mom noticed my distance, but instead of asking why, she complained about it. "You are changing," she said one night, and there was accusation in her voice. I did not deny it. At work I was offered a small promotion, more responsibility, more pay. It was not glamorous, but it felt like validation, like proof that I was capable of more than just surviving. I called Sarah first to tell her, and she celebrated me in a way my family never had. And when I hung up the phone I cried quietly, not from sadness but from the overwhelming feeling of being seen. My mom found out about the promotion through someone else at work and congratulated me in her own way, which was brief and distracted, like she was checking off a box. I smiled politely, but inside I felt detached, like her approval no longer had power over me. As moving day approached, fear crept in. Late at night, questions whispered through my mind. What if I fail? What if I end up alone? What if she was right and I was too sensitive, too weak, too much? But then I remembered the dinner, the photo, the empty space where I should have been, and the questions quieted themselves. The night before I moved out, I packed the last of my things. My room looked bare, stripped of the pieces of myself I had grown up with. And my mom stood in the doorway watching me. "You are really doing this?" she said. "Yes," I replied simply. She crossed her arms. "You know, family is important, Emily. You cannot just walk away when things get hard." I paused and looked at her calmly. "I am not walking away because things are hard. I am walking away because they never get better." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes, confusion, maybe regret, but it passed quickly and she turned away. Moving into my own apartment was terrifying and beautiful all at once. The first night I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, listening to the hum of the city outside, and I felt small but free. The silence was mine now. It did not judge me, it did not ignore me, it simply existed, and that was enough. I started building a routine: mornings with coffee and quiet evenings with books, music, soft lights. I learned how to enjoy my own company, how to listen to my thoughts without drowning in them. I made mistakes, burned dinners, forgot bills, felt overwhelmed, but every problem was mine to solve, and that gave me strength. My mom called occasionally. Conversation stayed surface level. She talked about family events, relatives asking about me, dinners, birthdays, holidays. I declined most invitations, not out of anger but out of self-preservation. Each time I said no I felt a little stronger. One afternoon months later I received a message in the family group chat. A photo popped up on my screen, another big gathering, smiling faces, my mom at the center again. And for a moment the old pain stirred, but it faded quickly, replaced by something new: acceptance. I realized I was no longer searching for myself in those pictures. I had found myself elsewhere. Sarah remained a constant in my life, And through her I met others, people who listened, who asked questions, who remembered details about me, people who made space for me without being asked. I learned that family could be chosen, that love did not have to be earned through silence or obedience. Still, there were nights when memories crept in, when I wondered if things could have been different, if I had spoken up sooner, if I had been louder or quieter or better. But then I remembered the truth: some people cannot love you the way you need, no matter how hard you try. And that truth was painful but freeing. One evening my mom called unexpectedly. Her voice sounded tired, softer than usual. "Emily," she said, "I have been thinking about you." I listened quietly. "I did not realize how much you were hurting," she continued. "Maybe I was too focused on everyone else." The words were not an apology, not really, but they were something. I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed grounded. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. There was a pause, and then she asked, "Do you think we can fix things?" I looked around my apartment, the soft lights, the calm space, the life I had built, and I answered honestly, "I think we can try, but things cannot go back to how they were." She agreed quietly, and for the first time I felt like the power in the relationship had shifted. That night as I lay in bed, I thought about the girl I was at that dinner, sitting at the end of the table, feeling invisible, and I wished I could tell her what I knew now, that her worth was never tied to that table, that room, or that family picture, that the loneliness she felt was not a reflection of her value but of their inability to see her. And as sleep finally came, I knew my story was no longer about being ignored. It was about learning to choose myself, even when it was hard, even when it meant walking away. After that phone call, something shifted quietly between my mom and me, not enough to heal everything, but enough to change the air around us. Our conversations became careful, measured, like we were both afraid to step on old wounds. She asked about my job, my apartment, my life, in short questions, and I answered honestly but without opening myself too wide. I had learned that giving too much of myself too fast often led to disappointment. Weeks passed, and then months, and my life slowly filled with things that belonged only to me: morning walks through my neighborhood, late-night grocery runs, conversations with people who knew me as Emily, not just someone's daughter. I began to feel grounded in a way I never had before, like my feet were finally touching solid ground. One afternoon my mom called again, this time with an invitation. There was another family gathering coming up, not as big, she said, just a few relatives, nothing like before. She sounded hopeful, almost nervous, and for a moment the old fear returned. The image of the long table, the noise, the laughter without me flashed through my mind. I told her I would think about it. That night I sat alone on my couch, lights dim, city sounds drifting through the window, and I asked myself a question I had never asked before: do I want to go, or do I feel like I should go? The answer surprised me. I did not want to go, and that realization did not fill me with guilt the way it once would have. It filled me with peace. I called her back the next day and said I would not be attending. She was quiet for a moment, and then said, "I understand," though her voice carried disappointment and maybe confusion, but she did not argue, and that alone felt like progress. Instead, I spent that weekend with friends, cooking together, laughing, sharing stories. I realized how natural connection could feel when it was mutual, when no one had to beg for attention or earn a seat at the table. I caught myself smiling for no reason and thought about how far I had come from that girl in the kitchen crying silently, while laughter echoed from the other room. At work, new opportunities appeared, projects that challenged me, responsibilities that scared me in a good way. My confidence grew slowly, not loudly but steadily. I began to trust myself, my instincts, my choices. And with that trust came boundaries. I said no when I needed to. I spoke up when something felt wrong. I stopped apologizing for existing. My mom noticed the change again, but this time she seemed to study it instead of fighting it. "You seem different," she said during one of our calls. "I am different," I replied simply. There was a pause, and then she asked softly, "Is it because of me?" The question hung between us, heavy and fragile. I could have deflected, softened the truth, spared her feelings, but I had spent my whole life doing that, and it had only hurt me, so I answered honestly, partly yes. She did not respond right away, and I wondered if I had gone too far, but then she spoke. "I never meant to make you feel like you did not belong," she said. "I just thought you understood." Understood what? I asked. That I was busy, that I had responsibilities, that family gatherings were complicated. I took a deep breath. "I understand that now, but understanding does not erase how it felt." She was quiet again, and this time the silence felt reflective, not dismissive. I realized this was the first real conversation we had ever had, not mother scolding daughter, not daughter seeking approval, but two adults facing something uncomfortable. After that call I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally spoken my truth without shrinking it. Time continued to move forward, and with it came unexpected moments. Healing is not linear, and some days old wounds ached, memories resurfaced, smells, sounds, songs reminding me of times I felt unseen, but those moments no longer defined me. They passed through like weather, leaving me standing. One evening I received a message from a cousin, someone I barely spoke to. She had seen my promotion announcement online and wanted to congratulate me. We chatted briefly, And she said something that stayed with me. I always thought you were quiet, but now I realize you were just never given space to speak. I read that line over and over, feeling something inside me settle into place. Months later, the holidays approached, a season that once filled me with dread. My mom asked if I would come home for a small dinner, just us. She said no relatives, no big gathering, just the two of us. I hesitated, but something about the way she asked felt different, less like an expectation, more like an invitation. I agreed. That night was quiet, almost awkward at first. We cooked together, carefully sharing the kitchen space, learning each other's rhythms again. There were pauses, moments of uncertainty, but also small, genuine laughs. We sat at the table across from each other, and for the first time I did not feel like I was sitting at the edge. At one point she looked at me and said, "I know I cannot change the past, but I want to do better now." I believed her, not completely, not blindly, but enough to allow the possibility. After dinner she suggested taking a photo, just us, and when she handed me the phone I froze for a moment, memories rushing back, but then she shook her head. "No," she said, "come here," and she set the phone on the counter using the timer. We stood side by side, and when the camera clicked I was there in the frame, fully visible. Later that night, back in my apartment, I looked at the photo and felt tears gather, not from pain, but from release. I knew this did not erase everything, but it marked something new, a shift, a chance. I thought about the journey from that long table surrounded by 33 relatives to this quiet moment of recognition, and I understood something deeply healing often begins when you stop chasing love and start choosing yourself. I fell asleep that night with a calm heart, knowing that no matter what happened next, I had already done the hardest thing. I had learned to see myself when others could not. The weeks after that quiet dinner stayed with me in ways I did not expect, not loudly, not dramatically, but softly, like a steady warmth that followed me through ordinary days. I kept returning to that photo of my mom and me standing side by side, both of us a little unsure but present. It reminded me how far I had come and how much strength it took to reach that moment. Life did not suddenly become perfect. There were still awkward calls, missed messages, moments when old habits tried to return. But the difference was I no longer lost myself inside them. I stayed grounded, I stayed aware. And most importantly, I stayed kind to myself. I continued building my life piece by piece. I decorated my apartment with things that made me feel calm, plants, soft lamps, art that spoke to me. I hosted small dinners for friends, laughing freely around a table that felt safe. And every time I did, I thought about that girl sitting at the end of a long table, feeling invisible, and I felt proud of her for surviving long enough to become this version of me. At work, I took on more responsibility. I spoke confidently in meetings. I trusted my voice and people listened, and every time they did, it healed a small part of me that once believed my words did not matter. I realized that confidence is not loud, it is quiet certainty, and it grows when you stop doubting your worth. My relationship with my mom continued evolving slowly and perfectly, but honestly, we set boundaries, we respected space, and sometimes we stumbled, but we always found our way back to conversation instead of silence. One afternoon, she surprised me by visiting my apartment. She looked around, taking in the space, the light, the calm, and she smiled softly. "You built a good life here," she said. I nodded. I did. She hesitated and then added, "I am proud of you." The words landed gently but deeply, and I let myself feel them without questioning, without fear. They did not erase the past, but they mattered in the present. Later that evening, after she left, I sat alone and reflected on everything: the dinner with 33 relatives, the pain, the loneliness, the realization, the courage it took to walk away, and the strength it took to come back on my own terms. I understood then that the story was never about that dinner. It was about learning to see myself when others did not, learning to choose myself when I was overlooked, learning that my value was not defined by a seat at a table or a place in a photograph. It was about becoming visible to myself. Months passed, seasons changed, and one day I found myself invited to another large family gathering, this time hosted by someone else. I thought about it carefully, not out of fear but out of awareness, and I decided to go. When I arrived, the room was full, familiar faces, laughter, noise, but something was different. I walked in with confidence. I greeted people, I spoke freely, and when I felt tired I stepped outside without apology. I noticed how my mom watched me quietly, not with control but with recognition. During the evening someone suggested a group photo, and instinctively I stepped forward without hesitation. When the picture was taken, I stood in the center, smiling naturally, and for the first time I did not wonder if I belonged, because I already knew I did. Later that night, driving home, I realized something profound: the loneliness I once felt was never a weakness. It was a signal, a call to change, a push toward growth. That pain had shaped me, but it no longer owned me. I had learned that sometimes the hardest lesson is accepting that love does not always come in the form you expect, and that choosing yourself is not selfish, it is necessary, and once you do that, everything else begins to align. I am Emily Carter, an American girl who once felt invisible in her own home, and this is my truth. Healing does not come from being seen by everyone, it comes from finally seeing yourself. And when you do, you realize you were never alone, you were just waiting to come home to yourself.